I am back talking about the Stanley Parable, and this time, it's about Stanley! Now, I have two things I want to talk about Stanley, but today we're going to talk about the less extreme one. As again, this is all speculation and theories, based off things I found in the game, so I always like to know what you guys think. Anyways, today I'd like to talk about Stanley's life before the parable. And we know this game does talk about employees before everything, considering Mr. A-Man seemingly has an entire section of the employee audio. 432, they seem to show him through an experiment before he becomes this thing. So it would only make sense Stanley too would have this treatment. And with further investigation, he does. In the regular apartment ending, we're told to press various of keys, while the narrator proceeds to tell us how we're slowly going brain dead, before at the end completely resetting us with this. However, during those little notes, if you're paying attention, will write a clear story of his daily routine. Good morning, employee 427. Please press B. Please press N. Watch TV. Spend time with the boys. Prepare dinner. Tell your kids a story. Tell your wife you love her. Go to sleep. Be at work in the morning. Question nothing. Good morning, employee 427. This shows Stanley has been in a somewhat of a loop even before the parable started. But there's more proof to this. My motto with the Stanley Parable is if it's mentioned more than once, I dub it as canon. We're gonna start with the easiest thing. Question nothing. This has actually been mentioned in the Freedom ending. The narrator proceeds to narrate Stanley, explaining he's never questioned the nature of his job.
Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him?
Funny enough, this is not even the first time we hear of another employee questioning their job. In one of 432's employee performance reviews, one of the reasons why he was disliked is that he asked too many questions, wished to leave, and questioned his job, which goes hand in hand to the note page from the Getting Started book from the original collector's edition. And on that page, we see a lot of help and get me out of here, Stanley also wishing to leave. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense and explains the question nothing. But there's more. The press conference ending. The same ending where we get Stanley's name. We even get a bunch of different posters, like your boss, your wife, and... I wonder if this has any relation to if you click the checkbox, you get a child announcer instead of the regular one. However, Stanley seems to have two children, since it says spend time with the boys and read your kids a story. Who is this? It's the baby, isn't it? It's the goddamn baby. It makes sense. The baby game was mentioned in the apartment ending. The baby is in the intervention. So is his wife. The baby game is starting to make more sense because it's Stanley trying to keep his child alive, which is why it's 4 hours long. Dang, narrator, that's cold as hell. I understand we didn't want to play your game, but dang. Composure. And before I move on, there is another thing I want to talk about. In the bucket apartment ending, on this shelf right here, behind these mugs, you can't get any more specific than this. You just can't. The last thing I want to talk about is the wife. Who is she, and does she even really exist?
Come on. Did you actually think you had a loving wife who'd want to commit their life to you? I want my apartment, and my wife, and my job. Stanley picks up the phone. He's taken to his apartment where he finds his wife, and the two pledge themselves to one another.
Given the context that 2 out of 3, voice line wise, she exists, I'm not even counting the phone or the note or the fact she shows up there. So the whole, oh, you don't have a wife? I'm on to you, narrator. I'm on to you. But who is Stanley's wife? I think we know her very well. Mariella's always been a weird character to me. She doesn't have that much lore compared to the other characters, despite having a model, which should signify importance considering the other 3 boys do, and they all have hidden lore. At least, that's what I thought.
Turn to go call for an ambulance.
But no way. a female character referencing they're going to call someone. And the only other characters that exist is the creator, the wife, and Mariella. You think that ends there, but that's not all. The bucket phone call and the crazy bucket ending has a really weird parallel.
This isn't my bucket. It's just a normal, everyday bucket.
This isn't your bucket. Wait, whose bucket is this?
He didn't even realize he'd forgotten his bucket at home in the first place.
Hey Stanley, it's me. Just calling to let you know that you left your bucket at home.
That's a really weird parallel to have, especially since there's not that many female characters. But if she's the wife, why is she the mannequin? And why does Stanley perceive her as one? I think that can be explained here.
There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you've forgotten about, Stanley. Your chance to redeem yourself, to put your work aside, to let her back into your life. She's been waiting. In reality, all he's doing is pushing the same buttons he always has. Nothing has changed. The longer he spends here, the more invested he gets, the more he forgets which life is the real one.
We don't know how long Stanley's been trapped here, but that could easily explain why he views her as a mannequin. He's forgotten what she looks like. And from these notes, they look a little erratic. They look panicked. He doesn't want to be in his fantasy land anymore. He's trapped and he realizes all it does is start over again. Which is why whenever we see Stanley and Mariella side by side, it's outside the game or Stanley's physically dead. But I have one last proof I'm gonna show you guys, and it involves the manual. In one of the pages, it talks about how a singular reassurance bucket can have up to 5 people sharing the same bucket. And wouldn't you know it, there just so happens to potentially be 5 candidates right here.
No man can own a bucket.
Why do I want to be with the bucket? Hear what the bucket has to say.
The longer I study this bucket, the less sense anything makes.
Cruel the world can be, Mariella thought, and she hugged her own bucket even tighter.
5. That's 5. If we were to have counted the wife, that would have been 6, which would completely break the laws of the manual. Unless the phone woman and Mariella are the same person. So what is Stanley's story? He was a simple office worker with a wife, children, maybe even a dog or 2, living in an apartment, trying to balance his job and his family, trapping himself in a loop while losing himself in the process as he's trying to escape, but with no prevail, which leads him to where he is now. But can he escape? I believe he can, and the answers to that will come in part 2.